Okay, Alexander, let's talk about sanctions against China, the sanctions escalator. We now have chips, microchips, which are now on the sanctions escalator between the United States and China. This is not going to end well for the collective West, is it?
No, of course
What's the
not. I mean,
story here?
absolutely not. I mean, it's what it is, in effect, is that the United States. It is extraordinary, by the way, I should say, how little attention this story is receiving. This is huge. And what effectively has happened is that the United States government is trying to impose an embargo on the export of microchips to China, not just the most advanced microchips, but any kind of microchips that involve US technologies, and which were based on US designs and anything of that kind, in a straightforward attempt to choke off China's, IT and AI industries and development, and stop China developing its own semiconductor industry. I mean, and this has all been done, as a kind of instrument again of economic war. Now, the United States is waging economic wars now against all kinds of countries. The biggest one it's waging up to now has been against Russia. I can remember how back in 2014 they imposed sanctions on oil and gas technology, for drilling, for pipes, for all that kind of thing on Russia. And they expected that that would work very fast, that Russian oil production would decline. But it didn't. The Russians quickly developed ways of import substitution, of developing their own technologies. I remember even the railway industries in Russia, came up with forms of drilling equipment. Then they tried to do the same with Russian aerospace. They stopped sales of carbon fiber technologies and that kind of thing to stop Russia developing aircraft. Well, it slowed them down by 3 years, but eventually they developed their own alternatives. China's not going to find it difficult to develop its own alternatives to US technologies. I mean, they have vastly greater resources than the Russians do, and this is a priority area for them. They already make microchips on a huge scale. They have more mathematicians than any other country, and they can now access Russian mathematical skills if they need to, which they almost certainly don't, by the way. So, what is the United States trying to do? I simply don't understand the logic of all of this. If you want to take action to protect American industries by imposing tariffs on Chinese exports, I can understand that. Up to a great degree, I can understand that. That was the traditional Republican economic policy. That was the policy that Lincoln followed. It was called the American system. You build up American industry behind protective tariffs. There were even people who adhered to it right up until the 1950s. That's an economic model I can understand. You may question whether it's appropriate for the modern world, but it has a kind of sense. It was what I think Donald Trump was trying to do. But leveraging American technological skills to achieve geopolitical objectives, which is what this is. In this way, by imposing embargoes, I mean, I have to say, this seems to me crazy. Bear in mind that, the United States and China are not at war. They're trading with each other. They're doing all sorts of things. The Chinese will react very badly to this. They will see this as an attempt by the United States to stop China's economic development, which it is, by the way, and they will react. And they will react by establishing their own supply chains, their own industrial processes, their own scientific methods. It will actually act as a stimulus for China's microprocessor industries. It won't act as a block on them.
Yeah, the point is not to help America, Americans, American industry. That's not the point of all of this. It's about trying to find ways to destroy China,
Exactly.
to hobble China. So something like that is in play here. It's very much the same thing that they've done and they were doing with Russia and every
Absolutely.
country that gets on the sanctions escalator. There's no real difference. This is very very predictable, the trajectory of things.
Yes.
But
It's the teenagers in charge. It's like, they came together
Yeah.
back in February and said, let's crater Russia, let's de-swift it, and that'll create a financial crash there. It's the same sort of attitude. Well, let's cut off China's access to advanced microchip technology, and that will cause their economy to gradually stagnate and then implode. It's based on no real understanding of how modern economies work.
They appear to want a conflict with Russia. I said Russia. That's a mistake, but probably a mistake that that makes sense. So they want a conflict with China.
Yeah, I agree.
They want this.
This is what's so crazy about it. I mean, I've been reading reports now that cutting off access to China's access to chips is going to compel the Chinese to launch an attack on Taiwan, because they supposedly need Taiwan to get the technology that is there. And I've seen all sorts of articles comparing this with the embargo on oil exports to Japan that Franklin Roosevelt and his administration imposed on Japan in 1941, which did in fact play a role in the Japanese decision to attack the United States in Pearl Harbor. I've actually seen these kind of comparisons made. I'm not going to go and discuss the history, what happened in the 40s, because I think that's a bad analogy at multiple levels. But I don't want to go into this. But what I'm saying, the point I'm making is exactly the point that you're making, that part of the rationale for this, if you read these articles, appears to be to goad the Chinese into launching an attack on Taiwan. And, is that what we actually want? Do we really want a conflict over Taiwan? But apparently we do, because you see, if we can have a conflict with China over Taiwan, then we can impose all embracing sanctions on China, just like we've done on Russia. And of course, that will cause China's economy to implode, and it will cause the fall of Xi Jinping and of the Chinese Communist Party. And, well, all the things that we've achieved in Russia, we're going to achieve in China too. I mean, that seems to be the kind of thinking. And of course, it's not going to happen. I mean, what the sanctions war against Russia has done is it's tipped the West into recession. If they launch the same sanctions war against China, well, it will cause them many economic problems, but it will tip the West not into recession, but into a cataclysmic economic crisis. But, that doesn't seem to stop these people from pressing forward and doing all these things. And as I said, it astonishes me, it bewilders me that that's what we're seeing.
It's complete insanity is what it is. Complete insanity. And you have the EU following along with it.
Absolutely, yes.
That's the part that troubles me even more. I mean,
I know.
Okay, you have children in D.C. with dynamite. You have kids with dynamite in D.C. making all of these decisions. But then you have these EU technocrats, these leaders, these distinguished leaders in Europe who follow right along with it. And van der Leyen, her reaction to all of this is moving Europe away from China is the number one priority. That's what we have to do now. We have to completely move away from trade with China. This is pure insanity. I wonder what Putin and Xi are saying right about now as they see what they did to Russia pretty much copy-paste play out with China. I mean, their telephone conversations must be pretty incredible to listen to those two leaders speak to each other, kind of saying, okay, so this is what they did with you, Vladimir, when they were sanctioning you. Yes. Xi, that's what they did with me, and that's what they're going to do with you. Okay, let's see how are we going to deal with this together. How are we going to handle this? I mean, this is insanity.
It is insanity. I mean, I have to say, I think that both the Russians and the Chinese went through a period of denial. I think they looked at all of this, a couple of years back, even a couple of months back, and they said to themselves, surely they can't be that stupid in Washington and Brussels as to do this. I mean, but I think that, well, they've now seen that people in Washington and in Brussels are that stupid. And as you absolutely correctly say, I think Xi and Putin, who speak very regularly on the phone, much more often than the two governments, acknowledge they're undoubtedly talking about this all the time, and they're comparing notes with each other. As you rightly said, one would love to be able to listen into these calls and to find out what the tone of them is. But increasingly, they must be agreeing on the kind of steps they need to take to protect their two countries against this sort of thing. So the Chinese will want access to Russian raw materials, fuel, oil, gas, food. Food is going to become increasingly important. Strategic metals, all that sort of thing. The Russians, for their part, will need help with their manufacturing, with microchips, all that kind of stuff, which the Chinese already make, remember? So you can see that if the objective was to prise these two countries apart, it's doing the opposite. It's pulling them together, and it's making other countries around the world increasingly nervous and conclude that the people in charge in Washington and Brussels are irrational, and it's causing them to distance themselves from the US. So India, which has had long problems with China, is now edging away from the Quad. It's making it very clear it's not prepared to break with Russia. It's gradually, so far as I can see, trying to find some way of sorting out its issues with China. Turkey is building a gas hub, is increasingly looking to Russian and Chinese financial systems. They're going to set up a joint bank with the Russians. They're talking about joining the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Saudi Arabia is imposing oil production cuts, is now talking about joining the BRICS.
It's so insane and so stupid what the collective West is doing. It's hard to believe it's not deliberate.
Well, it is. Well, absolutely.
I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying it's either peak stupidity or it's deliberate or it's a combination of both, because it's just so dumb what they're doing.
I mean, I have to say, lots of people talk about end of empire. I've tracked the end of many empires. I've never seen anything quite like this. I don't think in any period of historical time have you seen such a constant sequence of decisions that, frankly, have such an extraordinary demented look about them. It's like it's as if, and I'm not talking about an individual now, I'm talking about the whole system. There's some kind of cognitive disorder here, because it looks so bizarre that, it's unexplained to me. The fall of the Roman Empire was never as stupid as this.
TheDuran.locals.com. Look for us on Rockfin and the Duran shop. 10% off. Use the code. Good day. Take care.